teach about it. So as soon as I found out about it, I sent the culture everywhere. As soon as I got that first culture, I sent it to anybody that was interested in growing it. I believe fully in the open source movement. I don't want to hide anything from anybody. And by sending it everywhere, that's the only reason that I got into cultivation and learned as much as I did, as fast as I did. So I'll show you a really cool group at the end that you guys can join if you want to learn a lot about the Cordyceps and get into a network of the actual cultivators around North America right now. I sent it out, and then people started sending me information about the successes and failures they were having with the Cordyceps mushrooms, and this helped me to advance on the cultivation. And I started teaching people how to cultivate it once I learned. So this is one of the first classes I taught. The first class I taught on Cordyceps cultivation was actually in Decatur, Georgia, hosted by the lovely Cornelia Cho and Sam Landis. So that was really fun. And then since then I've done 2 more, which we'll show you guys some pictures. But this is Rachel, she's around here somewhere. She came out to Pennsylvania, hung out with us, and did a class with us. We've had lots of people come visit. So this is kind of our assembly line. It'd be cool to get a couple friends together, have one person mixing up the liquid culture, one person putting the grains in, one person putting the liquid into the jar, one person tightening it, putting it in the pressure cooker. That's how they do it in Asia. They have big factory lines where they produce lots of Cordyceps like this. So this is what Cordyceps farms look like right now in Asia. As far as I know, there are no Cordyceps farms like this in North America. I believe that we'll be the first one to do one at scale this year in Asheville, North Carolina. I'll be going down to set up one this fall. So we see people even cultivating them outside. I really don't know how this is working out, and this is one of the reasons why I really want to go to Asia. I don't know if it's just the strains that we're using here, but they really do not like heat. So one of the things that I found out really soon, that was one of the things I found out very soon, is they just won't grow at high temperatures. I thought because they were growing them in southern Asia that it might be warm, but in a lot of these rooms they're air conditioned. We found that the Cordyceps likes to grow most around 60 degrees. So this is what our first little farm looked like. This was a spare like pantry closet in my house, and we filled it up with racks, and then we tried a bunch of different Cordyceps methods. So this was actually 2.0. The first one I did in like a hydroponic growing tent. I really like those. They're very easy to control the environment. They have little ports for electrical wires and all that. You can set it up in a room and have it be different than the temperature in the room. It's really nice. So we tried this bread pan method, which we've had a lot of success with, and the jar method. The jar method is going to be most applicable for most people. The bread pan method leaves it a little bit more exposed where you can get more contamination. And then eventually we moved on to the blue and red LED lights because, again, the Cordyceps like it to be cold, so we don't want lights that are emitting a lot of heat. We need to run the lights about 12 hours a day, so we want to be mindful of the electricity. These produce less electricity, they produce a lot of light actually, and it's at the perfect spectrum for the Cordyceps to cultivate properly. Aren't those so beautiful? Oh my god.
How much does it speed it up?
That light?
Yeah.
The light stimulates the growth way faster. I mean, we've seen Cordyceps take like almost 2 months to grow to full maturity, and then some takes about 3 weeks. So yeah, this is some of the Cordyceps that we cultivated earlier this year. This is about the 3rd generation spore culture from the original wild culture that we had. So the original wild culture was the only one I've cloned, and then ever since then, every time I've produced fruit bodies, I take the most prettiest fruit body and collect spores from it. So this is what you want. You want a nice jar full of Cordyceps. You want a whole rack of jars like this. This one yielded about 2.5 to 3 grams dry Cordyceps fruit body, but then we also utilize the substrate at the bottom. So it's there's nothing that goes to waste. We have a process of trimming what we first do when we harvest the Cordyceps, we actually pick them off of the substrate, and there'll be like sometimes a little bit of thick mycelium attached to the bottom or a little bit of grain left on there. We'll dry it, which I'll show you some pictures of, and then once they're dry, we trim it with little trimming scissors. And the little bits at the bottom is what we use for tincture, because it has a piece of the mushroom, it has a lot of the mycelium on it, and then we'll utilize the rest of the bottom part for drying and making mycelium powders like the kinds that you'll find in the stores today. Whenever you're trimming Cordyceps, you get like a lot of resin on the scissors. It tastes really good, it makes you feel really good. Yeah, so this is a Cordyceps cake. I got a lot of like weird comments, negative comments about the original cultivation of the Cordyceps cake in the aluminum pans. A lot of people were saying that they were going to accumulate aluminum. I don't think that they were going to accumulate the aluminum, but I'm trying to push this product to a very health-conscious crowd, so we're making sure everything's like gluten-free and grown inside of a geodesic dome and all that kind of stuff, you know. So yeah, these are very mature Cordyceps fruit bodies. Blessings to the Cordyceps. It's so beautiful, it's like a forest. I want somebody to do like a stop motion film through the little Cordyceps forest. That'd be cool. So a lot of what we're seeing now is the paraspecium, these bumps here, and a lot of what we're seeing right now with the issues with the Cordyceps cultivation is at the very bottom here. You can see it looks like the mycelium is growing up on the bottom of the Cordyceps. If you let your Cordyceps get very mature, there's an organism that will start to express itself. Or if you leave your Cordyceps too hot, there's an organism that will start to express itself that we can't separate from the Cordyceps. We believe it to be an entomofungal fungus, something like what lives inside of lactarius mushrooms and will parasitize them sometimes. The species name is actually Calcaurosporium cordycipicola. It's an organism that lives, a fungus that lives inside the Cordyceps and will express itself whenever the Cordyceps is like not in the most ideal condition. So if you let it grow too old, it'll start to grow on there, or if you keep it too hot, it'll start to grow on there. And this is what we're seeing with issues with a lot of people's Cordyceps right now, because a lot of people are just getting into it as a hobby. They just ordered my little handbook, which I'll show you guys at some point. And they're just doing it as a hobby. A lot of people aren't investing too much into it, but it's very necessary to be able to control your environment at a cool temperature if you really want to produce Cordyceps on any commercial level. So these are some of our trials. We start a bunch of different strains. We'll make a bunch of different liquid cultures. We tried a bunch of different nutrient substrates. We would run all of our different strains on the same nutrient substrate and see which one produced the most yield, and that's the ones that we would then put into the mass cultivation. I never really produced like too much. I'd say we produced only like we've only ever produced under like 5 pounds of Cordyceps at this point, dry. Probably about like 3 or 4 pounds of Cordyceps dry is what we've produced at this point. Mostly because we've been doing a lot of experimentation and a lot of trial and error, and all that Cordyceps has been sold what I've been doing is I've been giving it to people at my classes. So I unfortunately did run out. I taught every weekend from February to July, somewhere around the United States. And I would give people Cordyceps, and I saw the weirdest reactions ever. It was so fun. So like, I've seen people that were like taking lots of drugs or like smoking lots of cigarettes, and they would have like heavy like detox reactions. Like some people would say like their sweat smelled funny or their urine smelled really funny, and they kind of felt a little weird. I've had a lot of people get like really like racy head feeling or like a lot of energetic feeling. But the most part, everybody just gets really horny. These things are like very, very powerful aphrodisiacs, and when you take them at the levels that we had been, that's what happens. So I would just dose people up like a lot. Like we would just put a lot of Cordyceps in there and make the tea really, really dark, and see what happens. And I would ask everybody, I was like, how does this taste? What does it smell like? Because personally, I mean, I'm one person. I'm only 3 years old. I still don't like certain foods and things like that. My tastes haven't developed and senses haven't developed to be able to like fully give this the best go. So I've been giving it to a lot of people and like getting more of a collective understanding of what the essential experience of Cordyceps is like. So personally, I think it tastes like a yeasty cheese. Like it has like it smells like a yeasty dinner roll whenever you smell them, and it has like a kind of cheesy flavor. Like a sweet cheese. More pretty Cordyceps. We typically are wearing gloves as we're working with them out of the jar. We're just trying to develop the best practices as we are the first ones doing this in North America. I did have a USDA rep come and try and we have a certified processing facility, and he asked what we were doing in there, and I showed him the Cordyceps, and he's just like, what is this? Like, how did you even do this? I told him the whole story, and he's like, where does this come from? Like, and I was like, it's from the forest right over there. Like, I just cloned it and started growing it. And he's just like, All right, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to call this. He's like, we're just gonna say that this is bread. Like he was calling our substrates bread. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done, and hopefully I can get involved with some more USDA work in helping to get this implemented as a serious agricultural product. More paradisium, real beautiful, very up-close pictures. You can see all those wonderful bumps. All of the Asian friends on my Facebook, they love whenever I post the cordyceps with the paradisium. Does anybody have the time? I want to make sure I get everything. 30, oh, awesome. All right, so these are bigger bread pans, and whenever we've been giving the cordyceps the proper environment and the proper nutrient substrate, we start to see it express itself in ways that we don't ever see in nature. I have only ever seen maybe a couple cordyceps growing from one insect, and maybe one really tall one, maybe the size of my pinky. But now we're seeing them grow nodular and branch off like trees and wrap around themselves and do all sorts of crazy things. I think the biggest cordyceps we had so far was the size of my whole hand. And we've seen pictures, which I'll show you the Cordyceps cultivation group at the end of the presentation, that people are getting cordyceps the size of their hand. Fat ones, they feel like marshmallows sometimes when they get really big. Oh, one thing I found out too is that cordyceps doesn't like corn that much. If you really want those fat marshmallow cordyceps, otherwise they're kind of firm. If just feed them a bunch of corn and corn syrup in the recipe, and they'll just get super fat. It's kind of symbolic, right? Oh yeah, Cordyceps hit New York. So yeah, we took Cordyceps to New York City. They definitely have a place in the gourmet restaurant scene. These are one of the easiest mushrooms to cultivate. They grow inside of a jar, all you need is an air conditioner and no simple mycology. I think we can get a lot of people producing a lot of revenue for themselves. I think that's kind of what that whole gold tank lease thing is, because with the implementation of Cordyceps farms in southern Asian areas, a lot of the education was going to rural farmers that weren't able to produce enough resource for themselves. So I think it's a really cool way to start producing resources for yourself. So I took it up there. I was up, I think it was where the square is. I can't remember. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with New York City. There's this big cube down there. But I was up at this really, really fancy house. I live in central Pennsylvania. All the houses are decrepit, falling apart. People didn't know how to build things back then, I guess. Or they just were doing it real fast and trying to move on with things. But it's very weird. And then I go into places here, I'm to Telluride, and the place we're staying at, just what the heck is this? I feel so out of place. But yeah, I'm in there, and there's all these rich people having this fancy little bug party, doing something weird, and they're just oh, we'll eat these cordyceps mushrooms. So they paid me a lot of money for those. I was all right, cool, there you go. And they ate the whole substrate and everything. It was really cool. I wish I had the picture. They made these really awesome mushroom tarts with one little cordyceps on it, and I'm just these are soon going to be at these fancy gourmet restaurants where people are going to be paying loads of money for one little cordyceps on top of a pastry. Which is cool, but you really need a fair amount of them to really get that oomph. I find that a gram to 3 grams a day is proper. You can push it though. I find it with lion's mane. If I eat too much lion's mane, I start to breathe out the smell of it, and that happens really fast with cordyceps. I'll just start to breathe out cordyceps essence.